Welcome everyone to a special episode of the Buck Stops here. I'm Kirk Buchner. I run NotInHallOfFame.com, the Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame, the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and my big project, the United States Athletic Hall of Fame. Look for the second group of nominees to be unveiled late January. And I have a very special guest. And if you are a fan of the Washington Commanders, nay, Washington Redskins, have I got a treat for you? I've got with me Mike RIchman. He is a journalist, a writer, blogger, everything that you could possibly want. And I just learned too here as I was going on your website, MikeRichman.com. I've got that right, don't I?
MikeRichmanJournalist.com.
Oh, MikeRichmanJournalist.com. Sorry about that. I learned that you were awarded something by one of my favorite websites, the Pro Football Research Association.
Yes, I did win an award from PFRA back in 2003
Mm-hmm.
for one of the articles that I had submitted on a former Redskins player. I believe it may have been Chris Hamburger uh, or it could have been one of the guys from the 50s. But yeah, I was given an award by Pro Football Research Association.
Yeah, and today we're going to talk about your, I guess it's your fourth book, if I'm reading this correctly, George Allen, A Football Life.
That is correct. Yes, I first wrote the Redskins Encyclopedia,
Mm-hmm.
which was published in 2007. Then the Washington Redskins Football Vault, 2010. Joe Gibbs, An Enduring Legacy, 2015. And
Mm-hmm.
now George Allen, A Football Life, my fourth book. Very, very happy that it's out and it's hit the shelves and doing very well from what I understand. So yeah, I mean, George Allen, legendary coach, was
Yep.
well deserving of this
So I
biography.
guess my first question to you is, obviously, you know your history of this team inside and out. There's so many legendary figures on this franchise. Why did Allen become the second person that you profiled?
I grew up with the George Allen coached Redskins. So he came here in 1971 to DC to coach the Redskins, and I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a DC suburb. So I was 10 years old at the time that he came here to DC, and I became hooked on that team. I remembered a few things from the 60s. I think my father took me to a few games here and there, but it was when Allen came here in 71, that was my team. I loved George Allen as the coach, and who didn't? I mean, in the DC area. I mean, he just uh, it was like the awakening of a sleeping giant because the Redskins hadn't been to the playoffs or the postseason in a quarter century. So he turned this town into a winner, the football team into a winner, and at the same time, I my father, who owned a men's clothing store in this area, he invited one of the Redskins players to come over in a promotional appearance, and that player signed autographs. I was like a kid in a candy store that day, and just one thing led to another. I gained a love for this franchise and also acquired an interest in writing and storytelling, and then later picked journalism as my career.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote for my high school newspaper, college newspaper, um, and I've had professional pursuits in journalism. So then I embarked on the literary career, starting with the Redskins Encyclopedia and so on. And now we have George Allen, A Football Life. And as a kid, I acquired a love for history as well.
Right.
Went to many museums in the DC area. And so, uh, yeah, so history, journalism, writing, it all intersected at one point in my life, and figured that these Redskin books is I should take that direction. That's what I should embark on.
So correct me if I'm wrong, and actually I'm just realizing I think you're the first person I've ever talked to who's from the DC area. My understanding from that area, it's football, and then everything else is battling it out for a distant second. And if that's the case, George Allen, based on what you just sort of said, reignited everything. Was that be safe to say?
I think that's accurate, yes, because actually, interestingly, when he came here in 1971, the Washington Senators moved out at almost the exact same time that the Redskins season started in 71. They
Mm-hmm.
became the Texas Rangers. There was no professional basketball team in Washington. The Baltimore Bullets hadn't yet moved to the Washington area to become the Washington Bullets. That would be several years later. And the Washington Capitals, the NHL team, did not become an expansion franchise until 1974. So this was entirely Redskins town, and one thing led to, and the Redskins became winners, really big winners. 71, they went to the playoffs for the first time since 1945. 72, they went to the Super Bowl under Allen, and after that they had three more playoff seasons under George Allen. So he turned this whole town into a winner based on the football team. There was really, not much else here. Although the Bullets did become good in the mid '70s, but it was really, really a football town in
Mhm.
terms of fan interest. And yeah, and then actually, George Allen laid the groundwork for what we saw during the Gibbs era. See, it was George Allen. He was succeeded by Jack Pardee. Pardee finished 500, was fired, and then Gibbs came on in 1981, and he was even more successful, much more successful than Allen. He took the Redskins to 4 Super Bowls. They won 3 of them, and the town became even more electric over the Redskins. And the story though of RFK Stadium shaking, that actually started during the Gibbs era,
Hmm.
with the fans
Yeah.
stomping on the seats and everything, and the stands. That actually started during George Allen, and then later that was magnified during the Gibbs era. So yeah, but George Allen started it in terms of the fanatical nature of the fan interest in the Redskins in the '70s.
Now, obviously, like you knew a whole lot going in before you wrote this book. While you're doing your research, was there some? I'm sure there were a few things that you came across that, oh wow, I had no idea. Was there a couple moments like that?
Uh, there weren't necessarily surprises in terms of like Allen's personality and the uh, the times, and he had an antagonistic relationship with the owners. That none of that was really a surprise. I knew about all of that from my previous research. I knew about it on the surface, but I really did a deep dive into all of those things. Allen's unethical nature with some of the decision making that he had in the pros, such as trading the same draft picks for different players. I knew all about that. What was a bit of a surprise to me is how successful he was as the head talent scout for the Chicago Bears. He held that role from 1959 through 1965. And all of those players that he drafted, that he was key in drafting, who are now today in the Hall of Fame, such as Mike
Mhm.
Ditka in 1961, Gale Sayers and Dick Butkus in 1965. And there were other great players that he drafted, Ronnie Bull, who was NFL Rookie of the Year in 1962. And then there were 2 other really good players in '65 who opted to play in the AFL. Steve DeLong, offensive lineman, and Jim Nance, running back. But those were also drafted on Allen's watch.
Mhm.
So, but actually, the real interesting thing is his focus on veteran players as a head coach. He had this really keen eye for talent as the head talent scout. What would today be a GM with the Bears, but then when he became the head coach, it was veterans, veterans, veterans. And I asked Bruce Allen, his son. Bruce Allen was very close to him throughout his coaching days. He was a ball boy, then later a team executive when his father coached in the USFL. I asked Bruce, why is it that your father had this, such this tremendous focus on veterans as a head coach? And the way Bruce explained it is that his father felt that veterans would be like the immediate way for him to win. He had that urgency. He wanted to win right away. He didn't like rookies who would make those mental mistakes on the field, who didn't follow instructions. He wanted veteran players, seasoned veterans who had proven themselves already, who knew how to follow game plans, things like that. So, but that was like the paradox there. This sharp eye for young talent, as with the Bears as a GM, and this focus on veteran players as a head coach. But that was kind of the surprise there. Why he transitioned like that as the head coach.
So I didn't know this until today, actually. So he did some work with President Reagan.
Yes, the two first met when
Mhm.
Reagan came to watch a Rams practice in 1966.
Oh,
Allen was the coach
okay.
of the Los Angeles Rams at the time. He had just been hired that season, and so Reagan came out to watch a practice, um, and it was actually right before Reagan was elected governor of California for the first time. And the Rams were on a little bit of a tailspin at the time. I believe they had lost 2 or 3 straight games. So Reagan gave them a pep talk. And in fact, he shared that story of when he was George Gipp in the movie Newt Rockney All American,
Mhm.
go out and win one for the Gipper. He shared that story with the Rams players at that practice. Then in later years, the two stayed in contact. And in 1981, when Reagan was elected president for the first time, he appointed Allen as chairman of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports. And Allen held that role through the entire first Reagan administration and then most of the second Reagan administration as well, up through 1987. So that was just one of the presidential friends that he had. Allen was also very good friends with Richard Nixon.
Okay.
Yeah, they had first met actually in the early 50s when Allen was the coach at Whittier College in Los Angeles.
That's Nixon's alma mater, is it not?
Yeah, it's Nixon's alma
Okay.
mater, exactly. So the two met at an NCAA event, and Nixon wanted to meet the coach of who was coaching at Whittier, his alma mater. So
Mhm.
that's where the two met, and then they stayed in touch over the years. And when Allen became the Redskins coach in 1971, Nixon was already 3 years into the White House. So, but their relationship took on a whole new dimension when they intersected in the nation's capital. And there's a story of Nixon calling a play and so forth. But yeah, and actually,
Okay, yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
in terms of the presidents in the White House,
Yeah.
Nixon is hands down the most astute sports mind of any president who's ever resided in the White House, and particularly football. I mean, Nixon really knew it all. I mean, he was very, very intelligent when it came to football.
Was there other celebrity slash politicians that he associated with?
But Allen was,
Yes.
yeah, um, he actually knew Donald Trump as well. He
Hmm.
knew Donald Trump through the United States Football League. Allen was the head coach of the Chicago
Right.
Blitz,
Yeah.
Arizona, right? Trump was the owner of the New Jersey Generals, and also Trump hosted some of the USFL meetings in Trump Tower in New York.
Hmm.
So, and then later, when Allen became the chair of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports, Trump was a really big supporter of Allen's bid to build a national fitness academy in the Los Angeles area. Trump endorsed that. He supported all of Allen's efforts to have adults and kids follow a fitness plan, and because Allen was very concerned in the 80s when he held that role of obesity among Americans, and so he really spoke out about it, and in his role as the with the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports, and yeah, so Trump endorsed that as well. Um, let's see, there was there were several actors that he had relationships with. One whose name is escaping me right now, but he was in um, it was the 1983 movie about where the high school kid gains the secrets to the nuclear facility, and
Oh,
uh,
Matthew Broderick?
Matthew Broderick was in the movie. But what was the name of the one of the guys who worked at the nuclear facility? That
Uh,
was one of Alan's friends, actually. His name escapes me right off the
I
bat,
want to
but
say Dabney Coleman, but I might be wrong
it
on
was
that.
Dabney Coleman. Yes, I'm
Okay, yeah.
glad you remembered that.
Okay.
Alan met Dabney Coleman in the 80s when Alan lived in Los Angeles, and Dabney Coleman obviously lived in the Los Angeles area. They went out to dinner a few times. And it was Dabney Coleman
Mhm.
who encouraged Alan to take the Long Beach State job in 1990. Right. And that was Alan's last season of football coaching, the 1990 season. He led the 49ers, Long Beach State 49ers, to a 6-5 record, which was their first winning season in 5 years. And then he passed away a month after the season. But Dabney Coleman was key in influencing him to take that Long Beach State job.
I just rewatched a movie that he's in, a football movie, of course, North Dallas 40,
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because
But
he got a small role in that.
I'm sure there were others that he associated with over the years. There were many that he met in
Yeah.
Washington. Actually, interesting about Allen, in 1975, this happened in the White House. Allen was invited to a White House dinner. Gerald Ford was the president at the time.
Mhm.
And one of the guests at the dinner was Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. At the time, the Egyptians and the Israelis were in peace talks, which would eventually end up with the Israelis relinquishing the Sinai Peninsula. But so George Allen, being George Allen and only focused on football, he was introduced to Anwar Sadat. Then he asked Gerald Ford, "Mr. President, do you think uh, President Sadat has any soccer players that can be converted to NFL kickers?" So that question was passed on to Sadat, who said in Arabic, I guess, and it was translated into English. Yeah, we may have a soccer player who I could find for you, or something like that. But meanwhile, Sadat was immersed in peace talks with the Israelis. I'm sure finding a soccer player was far from his mind, you know.
I
But
would actually hope that that would be far from the mind of really any president, regardless of country. But yes.
I
Uh,
think
so,
Alan
so we
also
did
asked
know
that
some
of the
Democrats. There
Jordanian.
we go.
What's that?
So we did know some Democrats. I was starting to wonder.
Alan.
Yeah, because Ford was a Democrat, was he not?
Well, actually, there's an interesting comparison
Yeah.
between Ford and Allen. Both of them attended the University of Michigan.
Okay.
So, but Allen and Gerald Ford was actually a great college football player at Michigan. Speaking of greatest, he is probably the greatest football player that's ever resided in the White House. Greatest college football player, playing at Michigan. So they had that similarity. Allen earned his bachelor's and master's degrees at Michigan and got his very first assistant coaching job or football coaching job of any kind. He was an assistant on the Michigan 150-pound midget team. So anyway, when Ford took over for Nixon, um, they had a
It was
cordial
Republican.
relationship.
Okay. Yeah.
They had a cordial relationship, Ford and Allen, but it wasn't anything like Allen's relationships with Reagan and Nixon, for that matter.
Yeah, I realized I made a mistake because I couldn't remember whether Ford was a Republican or a Democrat. So I said, "Oh, it looks like he does."
Ford was a Republican.
Yeah, so I guess he didn't know any Democrats, but Democrats, you can still buy this book and learn a lot. This is still going to be fun for
Yes.
you. Uh, he Allen eventually gets into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and because of what I do, this is obviously my big focus. But he gets there in 2002. It took some coaches have taken a lot longer to get in, but he didn't get in right away. Why do you think that is?
Well, when his last season actually was 1978, his last season of coaching in the NFL. He coached 2 exhibition games,
Mhm.
and he was fired by the Los Angeles Rams, which was really a, you know, it was a ridiculous firing, but it was a terrible way for Allen to go out, and he was basically blackballed from ever coaching again in the NFL. No other coach wanted to put up with him. They thought he was cancerous. He had these antagonistic relationships with Dan Reeves, the owner of the Los Angeles Rams in the '60s, and then Edward Bennett Williams, and he badmouthed Williams. So upon his departure from Washington in 1977, so that is one reason I think it took Allen quite a long time to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Another reason is he wasn't what I would call, while he was one of the top coaches of his era, like in the '60s. I mean, he was up there with Lombardi and Shula, and even into the early '70s, he was up there with Shula and Chuck Noll with Steelers as being one of the top coaches in the game. But he wasn't what I would call, throughout the duration of his NFL coaching career, he wasn't like entirely an elite coach in the league. He was a
Mhm.
great coach, and he has tremendous stats and numbers to support his induction into the Hall of Fame. But I think that's another reason he wasn't really what I would call an elite coach. And the third reason is that he went only 2-7 in the postseason. He had just a
Yeah.
very dismal postseason record. He never, I mean, his greatest playoff win was the 1972 NFC Championship win by the Redskins over the Dallas Cowboys. He lost Super Bowl VII, and he never went back to the Super Bowl. All told, he finished 2-7 in the playoffs, and I think that the regular voting committee looked at that 2-7 playoff record, and it's a major reason why it took him quite a while. But there was the impact of the other two uh, explanations that I gave you. But when Allen's name came up before the seniors committee, Len Shapiro, who was a voting member of the seniors committee, he was a voting member of the regular selection committee as well. But Shapiro had actually covered the Redskins for the Washington Post when Allen coached there, and those two had their confrontations. But still, Shapiro lobbied for his induction into the Hall of Fame in the early 2000s, and at the same time, a movie came out, or a film came out by NFL Films called George Allen, the George Allen story, Winning is Living, Losing is Dying. And that really told the whole story of George Allen. And it really, it did its part to justify why he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. So with Shapiro's lobbying, then that the video came out by NFL Films in 2001, right before his induction in 2002. Those are major reasons why it ended up being in 2002.
Okay. So where can everyone get this book and all your other books?
Sure. Please go to my website, MikeRichmanJournalist.com, and I have author autographed copies that are available through that site. I have the Redskins Encyclopedia, Joe Gibbs' An Enduring Legacy, and now George Allen, Football Life. They're all available uh, where I could personalize the books. The Washington Redskins Football Vault sold out on its first printing in 2010. So I don't have copies of that book anymore, but the other three, anyone can get an author autograph copy of those three books. And George Allen, A Football Life is available also through traditional means such as Amazon.
Mhm.
So I say traditional means because Amazon has become such
It's
a
where,
part of the mainstream today.
yeah, it's where a lot of us buy our books.
Yes. So it's available through Amazon, but if you want that author autograph copy where I put my John Hancock on it, you can
Mhm.
specify how you want me to personalize it. Please go to my website, MikeRichmanJournalist.com, and Richman is RIchman.
And you're also on the X.
Yes, Twitter. My Twitter handle is at MSR_journalist.
Mhm.
My Facebook page is Mike RIchman, and I have a page on LinkedIn as well, Mike RIchman Journalist.
Okay, wonderful. So everyone, I encourage you to go out and get this. You don't have to be a Commanders fan. I should ask you, what do you think of this name change?
Oh, I was opposed to the name change from the very beginning. I mean, I know a lot about the history of the name and how it was formed, and the original owner, George Preston Marshall,
Mhm.
he created the name Redskins. Like originally they were known as the Boston Braves. So the following year, when they moved across town to play at Fenway Park, still in Boston, he wanted to maintain a sort of a kinship with the Boston Red Sox. At the time, many NFL teams chose the name of the baseball team in the city. So he kept the Native American theme that he had with the Braves, and he also chose red from Red Sox. So
Mhm.
that's how we came up with Redskins. At the
Okay.
time, also Marshall had an affinity for Native Americans, and he named the team Redskins after a 1929 silent movie named Redskin, which was very sympathetic toward the plight of Native Americans. So that's the whole history of the formation of the name Redskins. And then, actually, speaking of George Allen, the logo on the Redskins helmet that existed for 50 years until that was retired with the name in 2020, that was George Allen was key to the creation of that logo. In 1972, prior to the 1972 season, a Native American, prominent Native American named Walter Blackie Wetzel, he was chair of Blackfeet Nation in Montana. He was in D.C. He had presided over the National Congress of American Indians. So he knew a lot about DC. He was here in the city. He liked the Redskins. He approached Allen before the 72 season. He said, listen, I don't like the R on the helmets. Can we change it to a different logo? So that Allen told him, listen, you bring me a design, what you would like on the helmet. So Wetzel brought back a composite of showing a Native American chief, a proud looking Native American chief. So, and it was actually ended up being the chief looking very similar to the chief on the Buffalo nickel. So that's the logo that existed on the Redskins helmet for nearly a half century. So I go into that, and then also there's the polls saying Native Americans, the two major polls, Associated Press, the University of Pennsylvania poll that was done 20 years ago. 90% of Native Americans are not offended by the name Redskins. So I know there are some Native Americans out there that are offended by it, but where we draw the line today, like how many people should be offended before that influences us to make a move on something. So in this case,
Yeah.
90% of Native Americans, I mean, they supported or they weren't offended by the name. So, but it was political pressure, the social pressure that really caught up with Dan Snyder when he decided to change the name. And it was financial pressure. The sponsor at FedEx Field, FedEx, Fred Smith, said he was going to pull the naming rights at the stadium. So that was the impetus for Snyder deciding to retire the name and logo.
And then he would later retire himself. Uh, with that, thank you so much for coming on. I'd love to have you again another time. Actually, I know exactly in what capacity. I do another show with a friend of mine, Paul Lawrence, and we're backlogged a bit. So there's going to be a few more coming out this winter, but we recorded a bunch in the summer where we look at classic football games, usually old Super Bowls.
Oh,
So
okay, great.
we've already done the first one with Washington, but I think when we get to that one, I'd love to have you on as a special guest when we
Yeah,
do
Kirk,
a
I'd
dive
love
on.
to be on. Please
Yeah,
keep me in mind. I mean, that is my, you know, it's my, I would call it my favorite topic is professional football history.
there
And
you
as
go.
a member of PFRA, you
Mhm.
know, we just we love talking about and reading about and learning about the history of professional football.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's certainly a passion of mine, and if it's a passion of yours, these are the books for you. Thank you all for watching, and wherever you are, wherever you may be, make it a great day because it's not coming again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Kirk.